An 84-year-old veteran collapsed in his freezing home. They cut his pension. They shut off his heat. When the world ignored him, someone from his past showed up. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Snow crusted the rooftops of Sacramento like a white shroud. Wind howled between the buildings, slipping through cracks of old windows and settling inside like a second, more permanent cold. Inside a crumbling one-story house on 28th Street, Walter Greer sat alone in a threadbare armchair, his breath visible with each shallow exhale. 84 years old, Vietnam veteran, retired dock worker, forgotten. The power had been out for 4 days. He hadn't meant to fall asleep in a chair, but sleep came quicker when the cold was too sharp to think. The heater, once noisy and temperamental, had died without protest. The gas line had been cut 2 days after his Social Security check failed to arrive. The check hadn't arrived because the welfare office said they hadn't received his recertification documents. He had mailed those documents himself, twice. On the coffee table, unopened envelopes from the state sat buried beneath newspapers. He couldn't read them anymore anyway. His eyes had grown cloudy with age. The reading glasses his son once bought him had snapped at the bridge. That son, Brian, had died 6 years ago in a hospital bed Arnold once visited during a campaign tour. Walter had sent him a photo afterward. A younger Arnold shaking Brian's hand at the VA hospital, both smiling with teeth. That picture was on the wall now. The glass had cracked from the cold. Walter rubbed his hands together, skin like parchment, fingertips purple. He opened a tin of condensed soup, cold and gelatinous, and scraped it into a chipped saucepan. The gas was gone. He forgot again. In the corner of the room, an old army blanket covered a folded cot. Beside it, a small wooden box. His medals: Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Combat Infantryman Badge, and one worn letter, yellowing with age, still in its original envelope. A handwritten thank you note from Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, dated 2005. Walter smiled when he found it, tucked beneath a copy of Time magazine from 1987. He'd reread that letter more than 100 times over the years. It was the only time he felt like someone remembered. He coughed harder this time, the kind of cough that rattled the chest, echoed in the ribs. His hand trembled as he reached the phone again. He called the welfare office 7 times since Monday. No one had answered, not once. The last time he got through, they told him, "You need to make an appointment online, sir." "I don't have a computer," he'd said. Silence. Then a click. Walter leaned back and looked at the ceiling. A crack in the plaster had grown longer since yesterday. His glasses sat beside him, taped in the middle, useless. He picked up his old flip phone instead and pressed a number labeled Sergeant Mason VFW. Voicemail. He hung up. On the front porch, the flag he'd raised every morning since 1971 had stopped moving. Frozen. He used to lower it during heavy storms, but these days his legs didn't trust stairs. So he left it there, faded and stiff. Like him, he tried to stand. His knees buckled. He sat again. Then something broke inside. Not a bone. Something quieter. A thread that had once connected him to a country he believed would never let men like him be cold, hungry, or alone. No tears came, just stillness. At 2:13 a.m., a neighbor found him on the floor, curled near the door with one arm outstretched toward the heater. The paramedics said he was severely hypothermic. They stabilized him. He'd live. Local reporters said nothing. But someone in the neighborhood, a boy named Darnell, 17, who used to shovel Walter's snow for $5, posted a blurry video of the ambulance lights reflecting off the window. No caption, just the footage. That clip made it to Reddit, then Twitter, then somewhere else. In the hours that followed, strangers began asking, who was this man? Why did no one help him? Why did no one care? The news didn't answer. The government didn't respond. But someone else saw the clip. Someone who remembered the letter he wrote in 2005. Someone who had once been just a young immigrant trying to lift weights in a strange land, where no one cared who you were, until one older dock worker looked at him and said, "You show up. You give your best. That's enough for America." It was the same man now lying in a hospital bed, forgotten, and somewhere in Los Angeles, a leather jacket was pulled from the back of a closet. A private call was made. A trip was planned without press, without staff, no speeches, no press release, no camera crews, because some debts you pay in person. The next morning, the welfare office on H Street opened like it always did. 9 sharp, metal blinds clanking as they rolled up. The sidewalk outside was already crowded. Mothers holding toddlers, men with duffel bags, elderly folks in coats too thin for January. A few sat on crates, shoulders hunched, sipping cheap coffee from paper cups with cracked lids. The intercom buzzed to life. "If you don't have an appointment, we're not accepting walk-ins today. Please use the QR code on the window to check eligibility and reschedule." Nobody moved. Most just stared. A woman with a stroller looked up and whispered, "I don't even have data on my phone." Inside, the office buzzed with fluorescent light, beige walls, gray carpet, plexiglass windows that made every voice sound distant and hollow. At counter number 4, a young man leaned in, his voice rising. "I already uploaded everything. I emailed it twice. My mom's dialysis is scheduled for Monday. She can't miss another appointment." The woman behind the glass sighed without looking up. "Sir, the system is under review. Try again next cycle." "I can't override it." "You mean next month?" "I mean next cycle." At counter 6, an older woman in a church dress tried to explain that her husband had passed, and she didn't know how to file the paperwork. The clerk responded with a laminated pamphlet and a forced smile. "You can find the instructions online." "I don't have internet," the woman whispered. "You can try the public library." "I can't walk that far." At counter 2, the system froze. The worker hit the keyboard. Nothing. Then she stood up, turned the screen away from the client, and called for IT. Her voice was louder than needed. "It's this guy's case again. The one with the faxed documents. It's all ancient, like printed. No digital backup." The man she referred to was Walter Greer. He stood at the end of the line, clutching his papers in both hands, breathing through a scarf. His coat was too big. His shoes had holes in them. He had waited 2 hours. He hadn't sat down once. The seats were all taken. No one offered theirs. A young woman in scrubs finally noticed. "You okay, sir?" Walter nodded once, barely. The man behind him muttered under his breath, "Should have stayed home." At 10:26 a.m., Walter reached the front of the line. The clerk, a woman in her early 30s with red nails and wireless earbuds, looked him over like he was a malfunctioning printer. "Name?" "Walter. Walter Greer." "Do you have your case number?" "No, Then I can't pull you up." "You need the number. Or you can scan the kiosk." I don't have a phone like that." She sighed. "Then I suggest making an appointment online." "I don't have the internet." "Sir, the line's behind you." Walter didn't move. He held out a folded paper. His military discharge, his Social Security ID, and a printed letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs verifying his eligibility. She glanced at it without touching. "We don't process paper anymore." A beat passed. One breath. Then another. Walter nodded. Slowly. He took the papers back. He turned, but his knees gave out halfway through the motion. His hand reached to the counter, missed, and he crumpled to the floor. The line behind him shifted, uncomfortable. No one helped. The clerk called out, eyes still on her screen. "Security to counter 3. We've got fall." It took 2 minutes before someone arrived. Another 5 before they offered him a chair. Walter sat in silence, eyes forward, face blank. The only thing that moved was his breath. Someone in the waiting area started filming. It was a boy, maybe 17, maybe younger. He held his phone low and whispered. They just let that man drop, didn't even blink. The video would go viral in the next 24 hours. For now, it ended with Walter being escorted out. Not offered help, not apologized to. Just moved. Outside, the wind had picked up. He walked into it, step by step, as if trying to prove he still could. Later that night, the clip was uploaded under the caption, Vietnam vet collapses at welfare office. No one helps. It gathered traction slowly at first, then fast. People started asking questions. Local journalists ignored it. The office didn't comment. No follow-up. No inquiry. But something was happening. Quietly. Far from Sacramento. In a house built with thick brick walls and quiet discipline, a phone buzzed once. A video link. No subject line. No message. Just a name in the sender field. Mason. Arnold clicked it. The footage was grainy, but unmistakable. He watched Walter fall. Watched no one move. Watched his hands. One strong enough to hoist steel crates. Tremble. He knew that scarf. He remembered it from 1972, back when he was a wide-eyed Austrian kid unloading trucks, desperate to prove himself. Back when Walter Greer ran the night shift like a sergeant still at war. When Arnold showed up late once, Walter didn't yell. He just looked at him and said, "You want to be somebody? Then you show up when the job starts, not when you feel like it." Arnold had never been late again. And now this man, this quiet, principled, forgotten man, had collapsed at the feet of the very system he once believed in. Arnold stood without a word. He didn't need cameras. He didn't need permission. He just needed to go. 3 days later, the sky over Sacramento was low and gray. Rain hadn't started yet, but the air was heavy with it. Inside the welfare office, everything was as it had always been. Lines, confusion, the hum of fluorescent light, and the cold professionalism of people trained to move paperwork, not people. There were murmurs in the waiting area about the vet from that video. Some had seen the clip. Some hadn't. Nobody knew his name. No one brought it up too loudly. At 11:04 a.m., the glass door opened and a man stepped in. He didn't say a word. Didn't look around for a number ticket. Didn't check in. He just walked forward, steady, slow, deliberate. He wore a black leather coat, worn but clean, dark jeans, gray at the temples. No hat, no entourage, no noise, just a presence. Some recognized him instantly. Others whispered his name. The clerk at the front desk stared, blinking as if her monitor had betrayed her. Arnold Schwarzenegger stood in the middle of the lobby like a silent challenge. For a moment, the room forgot how to breathe. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just looked straight ahead, then down at a thin man seated in a folding chair near the exit. Walter Greer, wrapped in 2 coats, gloves on inside the room, eyes fixed on the floor. Arnold walked toward him. Walter didn't react at first. Then, slowly, as if remembering a sound from long ago, he looked up. Recognition moved through his face like sunrise, slow, uncertain, then undeniable. He tried to stand. Arnold shook his head gently and placed one hand on Walter's shoulder. Still nothing was said. The room watched in silence. No phones out, just eyes. Arnold turned and walked to the front desk. The woman behind the glass blinked. "Can I help you?" Arnold pulled a folded document from the inside of his coat and slid it under the glass. It was a letter, printed, official. She hesitated. "Read it. Golden Future Foundation," she murmured. "This is your nonprofit?" Arnold didn't answer. She kept reading. Her face changed. Something cold slid into her spine. She looked to her left, toward the door to the back offices, then stood and disappeared into the hallway. A moment later, the office manager appeared. Harvey Bell, trim, polished, smiling like a man who'd practiced. "Mr. Schwarzenegger," he said too loudly, extending a hand. "This is a surprise." Arnold didn't take the hand. He placed a second document on the counter. This one was an itemized funding report. It detailed 12 months of direct deposits from the Golden Future Foundation to the state's Elder Care Transition Support Program. Harvey glanced at it and chuckled nervously. "Yes, we appreciate the Foundation's continued generosity. These programs are absolutely essential." Arnold lifted his gaze. "Walter Greer hasn't received a cent." Harvey's smile faltered. "Well, it's possible they were clerical." He applied 3 times. That may be, but he was eligible, fully verified. Your office sent confirmation of receipt. I have the logs. Harvey adjusted his tie. These systems can be temperamental. We rely on state contractor for data. You use West Grid Energy. Harvey blinked. And West Grid receives rebates for every delayed case transition to manual review. I spoke with the state controller's office last night. There's no backlog, no system crash, no budget freeze. There's only you. The room had gone still. No one spoke. A few people had begun recording. Harvey's smile faded entirely now. His voice dropped. You're not an auditor. You can't come in here and throw around accusations. I'm not here as an auditor. Arnold reached into his coat once more and took out a USB drive. He slid it across the counter. That contains a voice memo between you and West Grid's regional liaison. You told him, and I quote, "We flagged the ones with no family and no lawyer. Cheaper that way." Harvey didn't pick up the drive. He didn't speak. Arnold leaned in slightly, not aggressively, but firmly. This man helped build the city you profit from, and you sold him out for a bonus. The room exhaled, a soft gasp sweeping through the crowd like wind through tall grass. A woman in the back clapped once, then stopped, embarrassed, but it was enough to trigger something. The room shifted. People stood. Someone whispered, "That's the man from a video." Walter tried to stand again, this time slowly, one hand gripping the arm of the chair. Arnold turned and walked back to him, placed both hands on his shoulders. "You don't owe this place anything," he said quietly. Walter's eyes were glassy. He nodded once, barely. Harvey had disappeared into the hallway. No one stopped Arnold as he walked toward the exit with Walter beside him. No one dared. And outside, the sky finally opened up. Rain. Cold, clean, honest. Arnold didn't flinch. He opened the door for Walter, let him step into the world first. And in the doorway of a welfare office built on apathy, one man stood in silence, returning a debt not in words, but in presence. By the next morning, the clip had circled the nation. Local news stations picked it up, then regional, then national. No headlines shouted, no political spin, just a raw, quiet footage of Arnold walking into the welfare office and exposing what nobody wanted to admit, that a decorated veteran had been systemically ignored by a process designed to fail quietly. But what most people didn't see, what hadn't been captured on video, was what happened after. Arnold didn't return to Los Angeles. He stayed in Sacramento, not in a hotel, not with press, not with handlers. He stayed in a small apartment rented under a foundation alias, a protocol he'd used before when investigating veteran care facilities. He met with no politicians. He contacted no journalists. Instead, he met with two people, the state controller's investigator and an old friend from his early bodybuilding days who now ran a quiet compliance firm. They reviewed the funding logs. Each payout from the Golden Future Foundation matched the state's intake system. But between submission and disbursement, something changed. Names were dropped. Records vanished. Dozens of elderly recipients were rerouted into a so-called manual review loop that could delay benefits for months. West Grid Energy was involved in that loop. The company had signed a data services contract to modernize recipient verification. What they actually did was flag individuals who lacked immediate family, legal representation, or digital access, and recommend their benefits be temporarily suspended pending address or identity verification. Each suspended case generated a financial rebate to the welfare office for administrative overhead, a rebate that was quietly split through employee performance bonuses authorized by the regional director. That director was Harvey Bell. Arnold stared at the document for a long time. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out the fax Walter had once tried to submit, the one that had been deemed unacceptable. It was crumpled, nearly illegible from refaxing, but in the top right corner was a timestamp. Harvey's initials had been scrawled over it. He'd seen it. He knew. The next morning, Arnold called in a favor, not from a politician, not from a news anchor, but from someone who once owed him something far more personal. Years ago, During a forest fire outside San Diego, Arnold had helped fund emergency shelter for retired fire crews whose pensions had run dry. One of those retirees had a daughter who now worked for the California State Auditor's office. He didn't ask for special treatment. He just forwarded the documents. Within 24 hours, a formal audit request was triggered. It was discreet, but it was real. That same day, 2 agents from the Office of Inspector General arrived at the Regional Welfare Office in Sacramento, not with sirens, not with headlines, but with clipboards and questions. They interviewed staff. They copied email records. They took the USB drive Arnold had handed over and requested the original files from Westgrid under state compliance law. Harvey wasn't in the office that morning. He didn't come back. Instead, he issued a statement through a third-party attorney calling the accusations deeply political and unfounded. But the numbers were numbers. They didn't shout. They didn't lie. They just sat on paper, patient and undeniable. What made everything click, what broke the silence, wasn't even a fraud. It was the pattern. Out of the 62 individuals whose benefits were delayed, 49 were veterans. Of those, 31 had served in Vietnam. Not one of them had living family listed on record. Arnold folded the final page and stared out the window of the small apartment. The sky was blue again, no trace of the storm. He thought back to the first day he met Walter, how the man had stood over crates stacked higher than Arnold's head, arms crossed, voice like gravel. "You don't get to be respected," he'd said. "You earn it, and you earn it again every time someone needs you." That voice had stuck with him. So had the silence that followed it. He made one final stop before leaving the city. Not a press conference, not a rally. He visited the VFW Post 717. It was small, quiet, coffee-stained carpets, dusty photographs on the wall, men sitting in folding chairs talking about things they didn't say anywhere else. He asked if Walter had ever come here. A man in a cap said yes. He used to bring donuts every Saturday. Said it reminded him of base camp. Arnold nodded. He left an envelope with the post commander, an unrestricted donation from the foundation, enough to cover 2 years of operations. He didn't ask for a plaque, didn't want one. He just said, "Make sure no one in here falls through again." That night, a revised public report was issued from the California Department of Human Services. Walter's name was on the first page, listed as a recipient whose case exposed a structural failure in benefits distribution. They didn't call it corruption. They called it a breakdown. Arnold never commented. But the next morning, a handwritten note arrived at Walter's home, left in the mailbox with no return address. It read, some systems forget, but some of us don't. It was signed with a single initial, A. The following Monday, the welfare office on H Street reopened under different eyes. A quiet tension hung in the air, not from protest signs or loud voices, but from the unmistakable weight of being watched. 2 reporters from the Sacramento sat near the front, pretending to fill out forms. One had a microphone clipped to his shirt collar. Another man in a pressed shirt with no name badge hovered by the printer room, his eyes scanning more than paper. The staff had been told not to talk to media, but they had also been warned. Internal audit teams were now rotating through each department. Walter came in at 9:17 a.m. No one asked him for a QR code. The same receptionist who once dismissed his paperwork now stood up when she saw him and motioned for a seat. He declined. He remained standing. Behind him, a few more older men waited. Familiar faces from the VFW. Not angry, just present. At 9:23, Arnold entered. This time, no one gasped. He wasn't in a leather coat. He wore a gray sweater. No sunglasses. No camera crew. He carried a folder under his arm. When he approached the front desk, he didn't speak immediately. He waited for the manager on duty to appear. It wasn't Harvey. Harvey had been suspended pending investigation. The woman now running the office was younger, but sharper. She stepped forward with practice calm. "Mr. Schwarzenegger, we're aware of the audit. Our team is cooperating fully." "I know," Arnold said. "This isn't about the audit." She blinked. "Then what brings you back?" Arnold opened the folder. Inside were 12 letters. handwritten, some in cursive, some shaky, all signed by veterans from across the state who had come forward since the story broke, not to ask for attention, not even to complain, just to say they had once waited for help that never came, and that they were glad someone finally saw it. He placed the letters gently on the desk. They don't want money. They don't want speeches. They want the line to move. They want to be heard. The woman took the folder. I'll make sure they are. Arnold nodded. Then, for the first time since stepping inside that building days ago, he turned to address the room, not as a politician, not as a movie star, just as someone who knew what it meant to be ignored. Once. This office is not broken, he said, but the silence that lived in it, that was... He didn't speak long. He didn't have to. The silence that followed spoke louder. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Not protesters. Not press. Just people who'd seen the clip, felt something move inside them, and wanted to know what would happen next. Some were elderly. Some had kids with them. A few wore service pins on their jackets. One woman, holding a child, leaned toward another and whispered, "He didn't just come for one man. He came for all of us." Walter stepped outside next to Arnold. He stood straighter than before. Still thin, still tired, but no longer alone. He didn't say much, just looked around, then looked up at the flag above the building. It was new, fresh cloth, clean stitches, not frayed. Someone had replaced the old one over the weekend. Walter nodded. Arnold turned to leave. A man in the crowd called out, "You gonna run again?" Arnold paused, laughed softly. "No," he said, "I'm just walking forward." The man smiled. "That's enough." That night, a segment aired on national television. Not flashy, just a simple piece showing Walter's journey, the anonymous donation to the VFW, and the structural changes quietly being made behind closed doors. One clip stood out. It showed Arnold holding the folder of letters. The voiceover was quiet. In a country where veterans often fall through the cracks, one of them helped catch another, not with noise, not with anger, just with presence. Online, the clip went viral again. But this time, not because of outrage, because of relief. Because, for once, something was done. No screaming, no grandstanding, just action. In the comments, a man who served in Desert Storm wrote, "I never met Walter, but I know that walk. I know that silence. Thank you for seeing it." Another wrote, "My dad froze in a trailer park in '98. No one cared. I wish someone like Arnold had shown up then." And then someone else, just 3 words, "I'm not invisible." By morning, the welfare office received 147 new applications. But this time, 90% of them came with printed forms, neatly organized, signed with pride. A woman at the front desk, same one who once waved Walter away, told a co-worker, "They're coming in with fire again, like they believe it matters." And that was the point. Not that Arnold had saved anyone, but that someone had remembered to look. And once the silence was broken, others did too. It had been exactly 1 week since Walter Greer collapsed in the welfare office lobby. The morning air in Sacramento was warmer now, not by much, but enough to melt the frost off the sidewalks. Walter sat near the window of his small living room, wrapped in a wool blanket that hadn't left the closet in years. The power had been restored 4 days ago. The gas 2 days after that. A maintenance crew sent by the city, quietly, without press, had repaired the cracks in the ceiling and sealed the broken windows. They even replaced the old smoke detector. No one asked them to sign anything. They just did it. On the kitchen table, a new space heater hummed. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. Beside it sat a tray with scrambled eggs and toast, still warm, delivered by a boy Walter didn't recognize. A volunteer from a high school program. The boy had said, "Part of a civics project," he mumbled before hurrying away. Walter stared out the window. He hadn't turned on the television since the day Arnold left town. Not because he didn't care, but because he needed to sit in the quiet, to feel the room breathe again, to remember what silence felt like before it became dangerous. But today, something nudged him. He turned the set on. It was the middle of a news segment. A panel was discussing structural reforms in elder care funding, but Walter wasn't listening. He recognized the banner at the bottom of the screen. It read, Golden Future Fund expands statewide coverage. The reporter mentioned that the foundation had announced new satellite teams, not in major cities, but in overlooked rural areas, towns where access was limited and elderly residents were often left behind. No ribbon cuttings, no celebrity endorsements, just outreach vans, filing stations, mobile clerks. One of them was named after Walter, the Greer Mobile Unit. No one had told him. He turned off the television again. It was enough. He stood slowly, made his way across the room, and reached for a small wooden box on the shelf. Inside were his medals, the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the folded flag from his son's burial. He ran his fingers over them, then picked up a photograph. It was faded now, the corners curling. A younger Walter standing next to a much younger Arnold, both in sweat-stained shirts, laughing beside a loading dock in Los Angeles. Behind them, crates stacked to the sky. He'd forgotten that photo still existed. He placed it beside the heater and sat back down. Later that afternoon, he received a letter in the mail, handwritten, no envelope, just folded paper. The handwriting was familiar. Walter unfolded it slowly. It read, You taught me what showing up means. You reminded me that it still matters. Some debts can't be paid with money. They're paid in moments. Thank you for showing up when I was just a kid with muscles and no map. Now we both showed up, and maybe others will too. Stay warm. Hey! Walter read it once. Then again. He didn't smile. Not fully. But something behind his eyes softened. He placed the letter beside the photo. That night, the VFW Post held its usual Thursday gathering. The same folding chairs. The same coffee machine that never quite worked. But tonight, the lights were brighter. Someone had fixed the wiring. Walter entered quietly. He hadn't been back in months. A few men clapped softly when they saw him. Nothing loud, just enough to let him know they'd noticed. The post commander handed him a small pen, not military. It read, Never overlooked again. Walter didn't speak much. He just sat. Listen. When someone asked how he was feeling, he shrugged. Then he said something no one expected. I used to think being forgotten was the worst thing that could happen. He paused. But now I know being remembered is the hardest thing to believe. There was silence. Then a single nod from a man across the room. Then another. And then, without anyone asking, someone stood and said, To Walter. They raised coffee cups, not glasses. No fanfare. Just presence. Just people who knew what it meant to be seen. Outside, the flag above the post flapped gently in the night breeze. Clean, unfaded. And in a small living room across town, beside a working heater, a photo and a letter sat side by side. Two men, two generations. Both had shown up, and now, because of them, maybe others would too. The sun was rising over the hills outside Sacramento, casting a soft amber glow across the rooftops. A quiet Sunday. The kind of morning that feels like it belongs to a different time. Before emails, before headlines, before everything sped up, Arnold stood alone in the parking lot of a small cemetery just outside the city. No cameras, no speeches. He carried a single bundle of white chrysanthemums in one hand and a folded note in the other. He walked slowly between the rows of headstones, reading no names, just following instinct. At the far corner, near the old tree where the light hit just right in the early hours, he stopped. This was where Walter's wife had been buried, a headstone barely a foot high, worn from years of weather. The inscription was simple, her name, her birth and death dates, and one short line she remembered. Arnold crouched down and placed the flowers gently at the base. Then he sat on the nearby bench. He didn't move for a while. In the distance, wind rustled the tree branches. He unfolded the note. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't even meant to be read aloud. It was something he'd written the night before, at 2 a.m., sitting alone in the small apartment he had rented. A note he knew he'd leave behind, one way or another. He whispered it now, under his breath, for no one to hear but her. I once thought strength was how much weight you could lift, how loud your voice could carry. But real strength is quieter. It's a man holding his dignity when no one's looking. It's a woman who keeps remembering long after everyone else forgets. He folded the note and slid it between the flowers. Then he stood. As he turned to leave, he noticed something new on the path leading out of the cemetery. A small plaque had been installed, almost hidden in the grass. It read, "Dedicated to those who were forgotten before they were remembered." Arnold didn't touch it. He just looked at it for a moment longer, then walked back to his truck. Back in the city, Walter was getting ready to leave his house. He wore a press shirt. The sleeves didn't quite fit right anymore, but it was the one he'd worn to his son's graduation. He adjusted the buttons with hands that trembled less than they used to. Outside, a volunteer waited by a van. The side of it read, "Golden Future Mobile Services." It wasn't fancy, just clean, functional. Walter stepped in. They drove 10 minutes to a community center near Oak Park. Inside, folding tables had been set up, laptops, staff with name tags. Elderly residents from a neighborhood waited patiently with folders in hand. Some had never filed for benefits before. Some had tried and given up. Today, they had someone walking them through it. Walter wasn't there to apply. He was there to sit, to be seen. And every so often, someone would recognize him. "You're the man from the video. Thank you. God bless you." He never said much, but every person he spoke to left with their shoulders just a little higher. In the afternoon, a reporter stopped by. She didn't push for an interview. She just observed. And when she filed her piece later that week, it ended with a paragraph that no one expected. It read, "In a small city where nothing usually changes, one man's fall reminded everyone what standing meant. He didn't ask to be saved. He didn't demand to be known. But when he collapsed, someone showed up. And because that man showed up, a system had to answer. Not loudly, but thoroughly. And in the quiet, something began to move. That night, the Golden Future Foundation received a letter from a school in Bakersfield. A fifth-grade teacher had assigned her students to write about someone who didn't give up. One of the letters said, "I want to be like Mr. Walter." He didn't yell. He didn't fight. He just kept showing up. And someone saw him. There were drawings, too. One showed Arnold in his leather coat. Another showed Walter sitting on a bench with the words, "You are not invisible," written above him. The drawings were pinned to a wall in the foundation's hallway. No one took them down. And months later, when a new team member walked past and asked who Walter was, someone just said, "He's the reason we don't walk past anymore." In a world too fast to remember, one man had made it stop for just long enough to feel again. And for those who had been forgotten, that was everything. You may never know the moment your presence matters most, but someone else will. And when they do, they'll carry it forward, maybe with words, maybe with action, maybe just by showing up. Because sometimes the smallest act of presence can echo longer than any speech. And sometimes all it takes is one man in a leather coat who never forgot what he owed.